In 1997, Starship troopers turned fearless young faces into icons of war, loyalty, and sacrifice. But nearly 30 years later, time has rewritten every darker story. Some inspiring, some shocking, a few heartbreaking. Join us as we uncover who they really became and honor the legacies they left behind. Casper Van Dien as Johnny Rico. Johnny Rico, the Central Infantry hero in Starship Troopers, was played by Casper Van Dien. At 29 years old, he embodied a spotless, obedient soldier whose optimism slowly erodes under pressure. That quiet tension is the key to understanding where his real-life story begins. Born on December 18, 1968, in Milton, Florida, Casper Robert Van Dien Jr. grew up inside a U.S. Navy household defined by constant relocation. Moving between military bases meant fractured friendships and a childhood shaped by impermanence. When he entered the entertainment industry, that same instability followed him. Early television appearances such as Beverly Hills, 90210, and minor supporting roles provided exposure. Choosing acting over a military future strained family ties. As his career searched for footing, his personal life began to unravel. Van Dien married Carrie Mitchum from 1993 to 1997, a relationship that ended in custody disputes and emotional fallout. He later married Catherine Oxenberg in 1999, hoping for stability, but the marriage collapsed in 2015 amid financial pressure and public scandal. His third marriage to Jennifer Wenger in 2018 came only after years of accumulated loss, offering calm after prolonged turbulence. The physical cost arrived gradually. Years of action roles brought demanding shoots and repeated injuries, including fractures that compounded fatigue and emotional strain. Chronic pain settled in quietly, narrowing his choices and reshaping how he worked. His body mirrored the erosion already underway elsewhere in his life. Today, Casper Van Dien is 58 years old and still working steadily in film, often returning to the role that refuses to fade. His estimated net worth of $7 million reflects endurance rather than spectacle, built by persistence when momentum disappeared. Neil Patrick Harris as Carl Jenkins. Carl Jenkins, the calculating psychic officer in Starship Troopers, was portrayed by Neil Patrick Harris. At 24 years old, he represented power without muscle and authority without noise. Carl did not charge into battle. He observed, evaluated, and controlled outcomes from a distance. That emotional detachment foreshadowed pressures Harris himself had already begun carrying. Born on June 15, 1973 in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Neil Patrick Harris was raised by two lawyers in a household driven by expectations and achievement. Fame arrived early through Doogie Howser, M.D., followed closely by demanding projects such as Clara's Heart. Instead of a normal adolescence, success imposed isolation, forcing him to mature under public scrutiny. Recognition grew, but so did the distance between who he was and who he was expected to be. Adulthood brought the question of intimacy into sharper focus. Harris married David Burtka in 2014 after a decade-long relationship, building a family with their twins, Gideon and Harper. That stability came after years in which relationships existed under pressure, shaped by secrecy and fear rather than ease. While his career flourished, illness took a different form. Depression became the hidden consequence of years spent concealing his sexuality in a hostile industry climate. Emotional exhaustion accumulated until coming out in 2006 became unavoidable rather than celebratory. Healing unfolded slowly, alongside a career resurgence through How I Met Your Mother and later recognition with a Tony Award for Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Now, Neil Patrick Harris is 53 years old and remains active across television, theater, and hosting. His estimated net worth of $50 million reflects a career rebuilt through control and reinvention. Yet the emotional residue remains unsettling. Success arrived, but only after years of silence that permanently shaped the man behind the performance. Denise Richards as Carmen Ibanez. Carmen Ibanez, the ambitious Starship pilot in Starship Troopers, was played by Denise Richards. At 26 years old, she appeared composed and goal-driven, prioritizing rank and duty over emotion. Carmen's decision to advance alone placed her apart from the others. That separation reflects the direction Richards' own life was about to take. Born February 17, 1971 in Downers Grove, Illinois, Denise Lee Richards experienced disruption early when her family relocated to California during her teenage years. The move pushed her toward modeling at a young age, followed by small television roles that provided exposure without stability. Starship Troopers brought sudden recognition, quickly followed by Wild Things and The World Is Not Enough, establishing her public image while also fixing industry expectations around her appearance rather than range. Public attention intensified her private struggles. Richards married Charlie Sheen in 2002, and the marriage unraveled publicly through restraining orders, custody battles, and accusations that dominated headlines. The divorce in 2006 left lasting emotional and financial strain. Her later marriage to Aaron Pfeifers ended in legal conflict and court-ordered protection in 2025, reopening a cycle of instability she had spent years trying to escape. Medical complications added pressure. Richards underwent multiple breast surgeries due to implant issues, later facing recovery from implant removal that affected her health in the mid-2000s. These physical challenges unfolded alongside ongoing legal stress and professional uncertainty, forcing her to balance recovery with the need to remain visible and employed. Today, Denise Richards is 55 years old and continues working across film, television, and reality projects. Her estimated net worth of $6 million comes from acting, memoir sales, brand ventures, and income from OnlyFans, which she described as a business decision rather than reinvention. Her story lands hard not because of scandal, but because survival became a full-time job. Dina Meyer as Dizzy Flores. Dizzy Flores, the fearless infantry soldier in Starship Troopers, was played by Dina Meyer. At 29 years old, she delivered one of the film's most emotionally direct performances. Dizzy fought without hesitation and paid for it early. Her death became one of the film's most memorable moments. Born December 22, 1968, in Queens, New York, Dina Meyer grew up in a Jewish household before moving to Long Island, where she pursued acting with formal training at the neighborhood playhouse. Early television exposure on Beverly Hills 90210 led to film work such as Johnny Mnemonic, positioning her as a reliable presence in action and science fiction roles. That momentum peaked with Starship Troopers, placing her squarely inside the genre. After the film, Meyer continued working steadily but faced narrowing opportunities. Roles in Birds of Prey and the Saw franchise brought recognition, yet also reinforced typecasting that limited dramatic range in casting decisions. As the industry shifted, leading roles became scarce, pushing her toward guest appearances, independent films, and long-running genre projects. Career longevity required adjustment rather than pause. Meyer remained active through television arcs, recurring roles, and horror franchises, adapting to an industry that increasingly favored younger faces. In recent years, she has continued working in film and television, maintaining visibility through genre audiences rather than mass promotion. Today, Dina Meyer is 58 years old and still acting consistently. Her estimated net worth of $5 million reflects steady work rather than breakthrough reward. The quiet impact of her story is unmistakable, a career built on resilience, even when recognition stopped keeping pace with effort. Jake Busey as Ace Levy. Ace Levy, the sharp-tongued infantry soldier in Starship Troopers, was played by Jake Busey. At 26 years old, he injected humor and reckless energy into a film built on discipline and sacrifice. Ace laughed in the face of danger, masking fear with bravado. That contrast quietly reflects the life Jake Busey had been living in real life. Born June 15, 1971, in Los Angeles, California, William Jacob Busey grew up surrounded by film sets as the son of actor Gary Busey. Childhood unfolded under constant observation, with expectations he never chose but could never escape. Working early in films like The Frighteners placed him in the industry before he had an identity outside his father's shadow. Recognition came quickly, but independence proved far harder to earn. After Starship Troopers, momentum was uneven. Roles in Enemy of the State and later Tomcats kept him visible, yet competition and shifting trends stalled long-term breakthroughs. Casting often leaned toward eccentric or volatile characters, narrowing opportunities. The pressure to remain relevant while being compared to his father became a persistent source of strain. Career instability affected his personal life. Jake Busey never married, but he became a father in 2012 with April Hutchinson. Financial uncertainty and inconsistent roles complicated that balance, pushing him to accept television arcs, voice work, and genre projects rather than steady mainstream leads. By 2026, Jake Busey is 55 years old and continues working in film and television, including genre series and independent productions. His estimated net worth of $500,000 reflects a career defined by persistence rather than reward. Patrick Muldoon as Xander Barcelow. Xander Barcelow, the rival Starship pilot in Starship Troopers, was played by Patrick Muldoon. At 29 years old, he brought arrogance and competitiveness to a character built to provoke conflict. Xander thrived on dominance and status. That edge mirrored Muldoon's own transition from certainty into an unpredictable industry. Born September 27, 1968 in San Pedro, California, William Patrick Muldoon III grew up in a stable household and excelled early in athletics. He played college football for the USC Trojans, expecting a future on the field until injuries ended that path. Acting became the alternative, not a dream, and success arrived quickly through Days of Our Lives, where he earned a Soap Opera Digest Award. Following his soap success, Muldoon moved into prime time with Melrose Place and feature films, including Starship Troopers. Despite steady work, his career never reached sustained leading man status. Industry shifts and intense competition redirected him toward television films, guest roles, and later producing. Personal life remained largely private, though public attention followed brief relationships, including his well-known connection with Tori Spelling in the mid-1990s. Without the grounding of long-term domestic stability, career uncertainty weighed heavier. Muldoon diversified, forming the band The Sleeping Masses and leaning into music as an additional outlet. Today, Patrick Muldoon is 58 years old and remains active as an actor, producer, and musician. His estimated net worth of $1.5 million comes from decades of steady work rather than breakout success. Michael Ironside as Gene Raschak. Gene Raschak, the iron-willed commanding officer in Starship Troopers, was portrayed by Michael Ironside. At 47 years old, he gave the character an authority that felt lived in rather than theatrical. His presence was severe, uncompromising, and quietly fatalistic. That gravity carried the weight of a hard-earned life. Born February 12, 1950, in Toronto, Canada, Frederick Reginald Ironside grew up in a working-class household where money was scarce and ambition had to be invented early. As a teenager, he turned to writing plays as a way out, winning awards while still in school. His first recognition came later through intense roles such as Scanners and Total Recall, parts that demanded menace rather than comfort. Success came with a cost. Ironside became known almost exclusively for villains and anti-heroes, a reputation that narrowed casting options despite his range. Even with more than 270 film and television credits, the industry repeatedly returned him to authority figures and antagonists. The work was constant, but the creative freedom was limited. Marriage provided structure amid that pressure. Ironside married Karen Dinwiddie in 1986, and together they raised 2 daughters. Family life grounded him, even as his roles grew darker. Stability at home contrasted sharply with the brutality of the characters he was asked to embody. Health later became the battle he could not script away. Ironside survived cancers of the prostate, thyroid, and bowel, enduring years of treatment and recovery. By 2026, he is 76 years old, still respected, still working selectively. His estimated net worth of $6 million reflects longevity rather than excess. Clancy Brown as Sergeant Zim. Sergeant Zim, the relentless drill instructor in Starship Troopers, was played by Clancy Brown. At 38 years old, he turned discipline into intimidation and authority into fear. Zim's cruelty felt precise, almost methodical. That control mirrors the deliberate path Brown chose for himself. Born January 5, 1959, in Urbana, Ohio, Clarence James Brown III grew up in a prominent family. His father, a congressman and publisher. The environment offered security, but also expectations far removed from acting. Brown chose performance anyway, training seriously and building his craft from the ground up. Early films like Highlander and later The Shawshank Redemption established him as a formidable presence rather than a conventional lead. Unlike many of his peers, Brown avoided being trapped by a single image. He moved fluidly between film, television, and voice work, balancing roles in live-action projects with animation and video games. Voicing Mr. Krabs in SpongeBob SquarePants gave him cultural longevity that few actors of his generation achieved. This adaptability kept his career stable, even as Hollywood trends shifted. Marriage added consistency to that long run. Brown married Jean Johnson in 1993, and together they raised 2 children. While his characters often projected menace or corruption, his personal life remained notably steady. Today, Clancy Brown is 67 years old and more active than ever, appearing in major series, films, and voice roles. His estimated net worth of $5 million comes from decades of uninterrupted work. Seth Gilliam as Sugar Watkins. Sugar Watkins, the loyal, disciplined trooper in Starship Troopers, was played by Seth Gilliam. At 29 years old, he gave the character quiet resolve rather than bravado. Sugar followed orders without spectacle, absorbing loss without complaint. That restraint becomes the bridge to the man behind the uniform. Born November 5, 1968 in New York City, Seth Gilliam was shaped by the city's intensity and competition. He trained seriously at SUNY Purchase, earning a BFA that grounded him in craft rather than shortcuts. Early screen work arrived steadily, but recognition lagged behind effort. The grind of auditions and limited opportunities tested patience long before acclaim followed. Career pressure never fully eased. Breakthrough roles on The Wire as Ellis Carver and later The Walking Dead. As Father Gabriel brought critical praise, yet television remained fiercely competitive. Even as his performances were celebrated, awards recognition often passed him by, adding a quiet frustration beneath success. Consistency, not momentum, became his survival strategy. Marriage offered stability against that backdrop. Gilliam married Leah C. Gardner in 2005, building a partnership rooted in theater and shared discipline. Their collaboration on stage strengthened both careers, creating a private space untouched by industry volatility. That bond counterbalanced the uncertainty of screen work. A public misstep in 2015 disrupted that balance. Gilliam's DUI arrest drew scrutiny and briefly overshadowed his professional standing, forcing a period of reckoning and recovery. By 2026, he is 58 years old, still active across television and stage. His estimated net worth of $1.5 million reflects steady work earned under pressure, the sadness lying not in failure, but in how easily stability can be shaken. Amy Smart as pilot. Cadet, Stack Lumber pilot. Cadet Stack Lumber, the young co-pilot in Starship Troopers, was portrayed by Amy Smart. At 21 years old, she appeared briefly, yet memorably, representing ambition just beginning to take shape. Her role was small, but it marked a crossing point. From there, her story opened outward. Born March 26, 1976 in Los Angeles, California, Amy Smart grew up in Topanga Canyon with a tomboy spirit, splitting time between baseball and ballet. Modeling came early, pulling her into adult expectations before emotional readiness. Entry-level roles accumulated without guarantees, demanding resilience rather than confidence. Early films hinted at potential, not security. Breakthrough arrived unevenly. Smart gained visibility through Varsity Blues, The Butterfly Effect, and Crank. Yet, leading roles remained inconsistent. Hollywood often placed her in supporting positions, limiting long-term momentum despite box office success. Advocacy for environmental causes ran parallel to her career, offering purpose where roles sometimes failed to satisfy. Marriage brought love, then pain. Smart married Carter Oosterhuis in 2011, and together they faced years of infertility, a struggle that unfolded privately while careers stayed public. The decision to welcome their daughter via surrogate in 2016 followed prolonged emotional strain, turning joy into relief, hard-won rather than effortless. Today, Amy Smart is 50 years old, continuing to work in film, television, and advocacy. Her estimated net worth of $8 million reflects longevity built on adaptability. The ache in her story is quiet but real. Success arrived, but not without sacrifices that never made headlines. Brenda Strong as Captain Deladier. Captain Deladier, the doomed authority figure in Starship Troopers, was played by Brenda Strong. At 37 years old, she projected calm command in a world rushing toward annihilation. Her screen time was brief, yet her presence carried consequence. That quiet authority leads directly into a life shaped by ambition and reinvention. Born March 25, 1960 in Portland, Oregon, Brenda Lee Strong grew up disciplined and driven, excelling early in both academics and music. Winning Miss Arizona in 1980 opened doors, but it also fixed expectations around beauty and composure. She pursued formal training, earning a Bachelor of Music degree, and entered television through relentless guest roles rather than instant stardom. Career recognition arrived later, and in an unusual form. Strong became a voice audiences trusted before a face they saw, narrating Desperate Housewives as Mary Alice Young, a role that earned 2 Emmy nominations. The success was immense but strangely isolating. Fame without visibility. She later stepped back into prominence with Dallas, proving longevity, but never escaping the sense of having arrived sideways rather than straight on. Her personal life carried its own fractures. Strong married Tom Henry in 1989, and together they raised their son, Zachary, before divorcing in 2011 after more than 2 decades. The separation coincided with intense professional transitions, forcing emotional recalibration. In 2015, she remarried John Farmanesh Baca, rebuilding stability later than expected. By 2026, Brenda Strong is 66 years old, balancing acting with work as a yoga instructor, author, and wellness advocate. Her estimated net worth of $12 million reflects durability across decades. Dean Norris as commanding officer. The unnamed commanding officer in Starship Troopers, a rigid symbol of institutional power, was portrayed by Dean Norris. At 34 years old, he embodied authority without warmth. His presence was functional, not heroic. That tone echoes the disciplined path that defined his real life. Born April 8, 1963 in South Bend, Indiana, Dean Joseph Norris grew up in a stable, achievement-oriented household. Academic excellence was expected, not optional. He graduated as class valedictorian, then moved through Harvard College and the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, choosing preparation over shortcuts. Early roles came steadily but without distinction, often casting him as law enforcement or bureaucratic figures. That pattern hardened over time. Norris built a career around authority figures, soldiers, agents, commanders, work that paid the bills but rarely broke type. The turning point came with Breaking Bad, where Hank Schrader transformed his image and earned Emmy nominations. Marriage provided continuity throughout that climb. Norris married Bridget Norris in 2001, and together they raised 5 children. Family life remained largely intact, despite the demands of production schedules and late recognition. Stability off-screen contrasted with the volatility of his characters. Now, Dean Norris is 63 years old, still active in film, television, and business ventures. His estimated net worth of $3 million reflects consistency rather than excess. The emotional weight of his story lies in timing. Acclaim arrived, but only after years of being seen and used as interchangeable authority. Rue McClanahan as biology teacher. Biology teacher, the calm, ironic presence in Starship Troopers, was played by Rue McClanahan. At 63 years old, she appeared briefly, offering wisdom in a world rushing toward destruction. Her role was small, almost dismissible, yet it quietly pointed her backward. Born February 21, 1934 in Healdton, Oklahoma, Eddie Rue McClanahan grew up amid instability and frequent moves tied to her father's work. Money was tight, expectations were high, and humor became a shield early on. She pursued education seriously, studying at the University of Tulsa. Early roles came through persistence rather than privilege, including work that eventually led to Maude, where she first built a recognizable comic voice. Success arrived later, and with complexity. McClanahan became a cultural icon as Blanche Devereaux on The Golden Girls, winning an Emmy Award in 1987. Laughter followed her everywhere. But the persona hid exhaustion from decades of proving herself in an industry slow to trust women of her age. Her personal life was marked by turbulence. McClanahan married 6 times, including a long and painful final marriage to Maura Wilson, which ended in separation before her death. Relationships promised stability, but often delivered conflict, leaving emotional residue that never fully cleared. Illness closed in during her final years. McClanahan survived breast cancer in 1997, endured triple bypass heart surgery in 2009, and suffered a stroke during recovery. On June 3, 2010, she died at 76 years old from a brain hemorrhage in New York. No public funeral was held. Her estimated net worth of $5 million stood as proof of success, but not protection, leaving behind laughter that outlived her body. Bruce Gray as Sky Marshal Dienes. Sky Marshal Dienes, the authoritative interrogator in Starship Troopers, was portrayed by Bruce Gray. At 61 years old, he embodied institutional control without spectacle. His performance was restrained, deliberate, and cold. That restraint mirrored a career built slowly, far from instant recognition. Born September 7, 1936, in San Juan, Puerto Rico, Robert Bruce Gray spent his early years moving before settling in Toronto. He pursued certainty through academics, earning a master's degree in psychology at the University of Toronto. Acting arrived as a second life choice, not a youthful gamble. Recognition came unevenly. In Canada, Gray became widely known through Traders, winning a Gemini Award, while international audiences later recognized him from My Big Fat Greek Wedding. He worked relentlessly, appearing in more than 100 film and television projects, often as judges, executives, or authority figures. Illness ended that endurance. Gray was diagnosed with brain cancer, which progressed aggressively. On December 13, 2017, he died at 81 years old in Los Angeles. No widely publicized memorial followed. His estimated net worth of $1 million reflected a lifetime of steady work, proof that persistence can sustain a career even when applause never grows loud. Nearly 3 decades later, the cast of Starship Troopers no longer looks like the fearless young soldiers we remember. Time reshaped their faces, their careers, and in some cases, their lives in ways no one could have predicted. Some rose quietly, some vanished from the spotlight, and others left us far too soon. So when you look at them then and now in 2026, which transformation shocked you the most, and whose story deserves to be told deeper? Like, subscribe, and comment below to keep exploring the untold journeys behind the films you thought you knew.